Hello guys, as I promised a couple of days ago, here we are in dedicated CSS playlist. Tutorials will be Full HD or 1080p, so I think you're gonna be happy with resolution. Right, what about number of tutorials? Well, we're gonna have around 40 of them, which is a decent number. So on top of that, when you add already existing HTML tutorials from dedicated playlist, we are talking about 70 tutorials, which is a very nice number of videos a little bit later when you decide to go with the JavaScript or PHP. And honestly guys, you're gonna learn both of these languages over time, if for nothing else than for basic programming literacy. So that being said, what about knowledge of HTML you need to possess right now to go through these tutorials without problem? So don't worry about that, because if you know the difference between head section and body section, if you know on top of your mind a couple of meta tags and what's the difference between title tag, element and let's say meta tag for character encoding, you're good to go. And especially if without help from outside world, right now you can go and create table in HTML, like very rudimentary one with a couple of rows and columns with different backgrounds, you're like expert. So don't worry. Okay, so what about setup on my side when we are talking about files and folders? Well, on desktop I'm gonna have a CSS folder, and I strongly advise you to replicate this scenario. So in this CSS folder I'm gonna have troll.jpg, which is just a very simple image of troll, nothing special here. We're gonna torture it when we do all kind of testing. Why not? Because troll is torturing us all over the place, especially on 4chan. So that's about image. Now test.html is a file, HTML file, basically very simple web page. I'm gonna have it so simplified because I need you guys to understand everything. So just 10 or 15 lines of code is enough here. But of course those things will vary over time because we're gonna practice, but nothing special. Nothing dangerous. Right, so my style, this is a CSS file. CSS files are places where you're gonna put CSS codes, and CSS codes are like plain English. So when you use CSS on your HTML page, you have option to like type them directly here in a head section or to import dedicated file. In my case, that will be mystyle.css, and this is just textual file. It's not encrypted, it's not encoded, no big deal. You can go right now and create it in your favorite editor. And yeah, you can leave that for next tutorial where we're gonna remind ourselves how to do inclusion of CSS in HTML, because probably guys, I'm sure that you know how to do this, most of you, but still we need to do that in the next tutorial because I need to make sure that all of us have a same background, like a same base. So right now, what's the major difference between CSS and HTML? Both of these are like almost plain English. So in HTML you're gonna say for heading like h1 and let's say heading, and the difference here is in HTML you're gonna use arrows and equality symbols a little bit later when you work with attributes, but in a CSS you will not use these arrows. There is no opening tag and closing tag in CSS. In CSS you have targets. Let's use the terminology target here to simplify things. So when you say h1 in CSS, you're gonna target absolutely all h1 tags in your page, no matter how many of them you have. And then you're gonna use brackets, but curly brackets, okay? We will not have arrows, just curly brackets, no square brackets, no like normal brackets, no, curly brackets, and that's it. Okay, very simple stuff. So for example, if you are in plain HTML and if you want to change this color to red, you want to say something like this, like font, and font, you need to open it and close it, and in here you're going to say like color equals red. And now this thing will become, of course, red on the screen. But what if you have 5 of these, I don't know, or 10 of these, or the better option is to have h2 and H3, many of them on page, but only one, H1. But for simplicity reasons, for testing purposes, let's say that you have like a couple of them. And if you wanna like change all of them, like color them, you need to do that manually or through search and replace, which is kind of manual labor at the end of the day. So you're gonna say something like blue here and blue down there and so on, which is a lot of work even if you have a couple of these. So the solution here is to use CSS, because with CSS you're gonna replicate one change all over the place. So in CSS you're gonna say I'm gonna target H1, and with the color I'm gonna change color for all of these automatically. So let's change it to, for example, green. Okay, and when you activate this, that thing will be like, that thing will propagate through page and do automatic changes. So of course then you don't need to use these font tags. It's absolutely unnecessary. So what you need to do is just, well, let me type that all over again, why not? So you will just have classical H1 element, okay, and without any additional tags. And now just grab these things, these CSS thingies, and put it in a head section, okay? Because you cannot use CSS down there like this, you must activate it in head section inside of general borders for CSS, and we're gonna do that with style. So style, those things are like HTML tags to include CSS, so like borders around CSS codes. So now when you do that, this black by default heading will become green one, and if you have many of these, like I don't know, hundreds, something like that, I don't know what you're doing, then that thing will automatically replicate. So see, with the one line of CSS code we have so many changes, and we are talking here just about H1. And what about all these H2s, trees and paragraphs and tables? So CSS will simplify your life so much. Okay, so I'm gonna shut up here, and in next tutorial we're gonna do, and we will understand inclusion of CSS into HTML in 3 ways. We will have inline CSS, where we're gonna target any of these if we have to. Then we will have internal CSS, and this is actually internal CSS inside the head section, and then we will play around with external CSS, which is definitely the best option when you decide to finally put your website in a real world on a hosting provider service. So bottom line, you can practice with internal CSS and inline CSS, but when you are done with the experimentation, when you are satisfied with results, then definitely my advice is to use external CSS file. So don't worry about that. Thank you for watching, and we're gonna do that in the next tutorial. Right? See you there.